Accountability means not versioning the truth with one another, seeing the world as it really is, not having fear to have the hard conversations, and recognize that the only reason you ever have the hard conversations is because we're all working towards the same thing, which is we want to build a phenomenally successful company.
This is the Organizational Health Advantage podcast with Keith Hadley and James Felton, principal consultants at Table Group. They're in the business of coaching leaders to build strategic focus and cultural alignment that leads to amazing results. Welcome to the Org Health Advantage.
Hello, and welcome back to the Organizational Health Advantage podcast. I'm your co-host, James Felton, and I'm joined, as always, by Keith Hadley, my good friend and colleague, and we're joined by another good friend and colleague, Nate Nielson. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great.
Super good. Happy to be here.
Awesome. This is our second go at the Open because I've had some fighter jets flying over. I'm outside at a coffee shop, and it's been kind of funny. Like, how in the world are they picking this time right now? Like, of all times. So anyway, but we're joined by Scott Howe, CEO of LiveRamp, who Nate, you have been working with Scott for a while now, and I had the pleasure of joining you both. So why don't you introduce Scott a little bit more than I have?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do it quick, and then Scott, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself. So I ran into Scott, I want to say early 2024. Started working with you and your leadership team, and honestly, it's been a lot of fun. I've done a lot of work with you, your team, and then kind of next level teams as well throughout the last 18 months or so. But Scott is the CEO of LiveRamp, and LiveRamp, they do data collaboration, which took me a little while to figure out exactly what that was, but I feel like I'm more of an expert now than I was a year and a half ago. But Scott, why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us kind of who you are, where you came from, and why LiveRamp.
Yeah, I'm Scott Howe, the CEO of LiveRamp. I've been in this role for, I guess, about 14 years. LiveRamp and its predecessor company, a company called Axiom. My career, my adult life has been defined by big data. I kind of joined the workforce right about the time the internet was going crazy. And at the time, I was a consultant for the Boston Consulting Group, and they had staffed me on an airline project. And I was redoing the yield management system and route profitability for Qantas Airways in Australia. And what I realized is the companies that had data and made sense of it, well, they won, and those that didn't fell behind. And so on the heels of that project, I kind of took a look around and said, where else is there just such a data imbalance where there's a ton of data and people aren't making good use of it? Well, right then the internet was taken off. And my career has been attached to the internet, big data, digital marketing for, nearly 3 decades now. So over the course of time, I helped build what became the world's biggest digital agency. It was called Avenue A Razorfish. I ran Microsoft Advertising after they had acquired a company I was with. Satya Nadella was actually my engineering partner when I was at Microsoft. And so that was great to see someone as talented as him in action. He was amazing.
I feel like I just want to stop the podcast right there and just like switch gears and let's just talk about that. But we won't. But yeah, at some point you have to tell us what it was like to work with him because has such a good reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you saw this morning, but they crossed the $1 trillion company valuation. And I would tell you, 14 years ago when I left to become the CEO of Axiom, Microsoft wasn't worth $1 trillion. It was worth something far less. I wish I would have held on to more stock. But, what's the common denominator of that journey? I mean, it's Satya. And, what he brought to Microsoft could be a book by you. I know you had helped Microsoft along the way. But so much of what he believes in is open collaboration, building trust, having the hard conversations. And I think Microsoft has done a really good job of that under his tenure. And not only within their organization, but outside their organization, because they recognize we live in a connected world, and Microsoft is only as good as the success of their partners and clients. And so he's extended that culture out into the partner ecosystem, I think, with a lot of success.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
For sure. Well, that's awesome. And I want to get back to LiveRamp. We can get to Microsoft in a little bit, but
my bad.
It's okay, Keith. It's okay.
I'm not as distracting as a fighter jet, but pretty close.
Well, here's one thing I'll say really quick. We talk with CEOs all the time about being both smart and healthy. And one of my favorite things is getting in a room full of smart people and realizing really quickly that I'm the dumbest person in the room. And that happened right away at LiveRamp. But I'd love to know, Scott, like, why was there interest a year and a half ago to work on the health of the team? And then also talk to us a little bit about some of the things you've learned along the way. And then I've got a couple stories I want to jump into too. But why were you interested in the health, and then what have you learned?
Sure. Well, I mean, you used the word health, and I think it is the right word. If any of us think about, going to the doctor or dentist, and just doing the semi-annual teeth clean at the doctor, the annual physical, or at the dentist, the annual physical at the doctor, those are probably appointments that we kind of dread. But we know they're necessary. And if you're anything like me, I go to the doctor every year and they say, hey, you look pretty healthy, but you need to eat less, you need to exercise more. And bam, it's that reminder to get back into good habits.
Yeah.
And what I would tell you is, Nate, I mean, to us, you were an organizational doctor that came and diagnosed some things that, weren't diseased, but weren't fully healthy either. And you forced us through logic and stories and a lot of group interaction to really embrace some healthy habits. And, I'll tell you a story, guys. The first time I met Nate, like in person, we had booked a retreat a few miles away from where our office is, a little bit further south of us in Silicon Valley. And, we had this room, and you walk into the room and it's completely packed, right? Because I'm bringing our leadership team. And our leadership at the team at the time was 13 people.
Oh, man.
Because it had my direct reports, but then we also had people that I felt had, a unique perspective that if they weren't at the table would otherwise not be heard. And Nate kind of pulls me aside like 30 minutes into this session when we're at a break. He kind of whispers in my ear. He's like, I think you got too many people here. And I said, this is the first time that Nate and I have had any interaction whatsoever. So this is the first piece of advice he's given me. He's doing it in a really soft way. And so I listen, I'm trying to be nice, and I immediately think, this Nate, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And I say, Nate, this is the right group, right? We got 13 people here. All of them bring something unique. And if not every voice was at this table, then we would lose out on the conversation. He's like, all right. He just nods like a patient father. He's like, let's see. And what I realized as we got into things and we started having hard conversations with one another, it illustrated exactly that one of the challenges we were having function as a leadership team, which is when, there are that many people at the table and everybody is expressing their opinion, it soon devolves into chaos because there's so many opinions that by the time everyone expresses their opinion, the meeting's over and you haven't decided anything. You haven't had the hard conversations. Moreover, with that many people, not everybody has built the right level of trust with one another, and you can't have the intimate, hard conversations.
Wow.
And so it took me, I don't know, a few months to kind of get to where Nate was. But here we are a year and a half later. And, if we had that meeting again, there wouldn't be 12 or 13 people at the table. There would only be 8. And
Scott,
that feels really manageable. And I see it in the day-to-day business. Like things just work faster. The conversations are more real, more honest, and we make decisions quicker.
Wow. So better conversations, better decisions, faster. I'm curious, and maybe this was something you collaborated with Nate on or came up with on your own, but what do you recall the criteria that you used as you were trying to figure out, all right, who do I really need around this table with me?
Oh, Nate, I don't know. You probably had a fantastic framework for it that I have since forgotten. But
Well,
Nate's a little bit like the horse whisperer, right? I mean, he just kind of whispers in your ear. You kind of ignore it, and then like an hour later, you're like, "What was it he said?" Oh yeah, it's brilliant. And so, listen, we got to a place where we had less people, but uh, all the right opinions were represented. And, there are times when we need another expert in the room, and we invite those folks in for those conversations, but not every conversation.
Yeah.
And let me add just a couple of quick things. And Scott, I don't know if you remember this, but I vividly remember it. After I quietly whispered in your ear, I think it was a few hours later on that first day, I kept seeing the team spin and all those things you're talking about. And somebody asked me like my opinion on the team in front of everybody. And I said I don't remember exactly what I said, but something like, there are a lot of people in this room. And when there's this many people, and you spoke up pretty quickly, like, this is the team. And I think you were trying to validate everyone in the room, which was the right thing to do in the moment, and you kind of looked at me like, shut up, Nate. Like, this is not the time to talk about it. And I was like, oh, well, I'm never going to see Scott again. So let's see how this goes. But I do think that was kind of the beauty of working with you in LiveRamp, is like, you would take the advice, maybe not necessarily implement it right away, but like think about it, watch the team, see how they would, react or respond to certain situations. And then like over time, make those decisions. And I think, I don't recall all the specifics, but over the last year and a half, I think naturally some folks, someone left, I think someone retired and those types of things. But we talk with leaders all the time that shrinking your team is a lot harder than building and growing your team. And so, the wisdom in the beginning that you had was like, hey, we got to figure out how to it took a little longer. It took a year and a half, but you're in a great spot now. So I think that was a fun story.
Well, it's interesting. We talk a lot as a leadership team and into the organization as well, that great companies should be able to look in the mirror and never fully like what they see. Like you got to see the world as it really is, as opposed to encumbered by your hopes and dreams. And I think one of the advantages of working with someone like the Table Group has been, you see the world through a different lens than we do. It's very objective. And so you can tell us exactly what you see and where we might be running into danger spots. And it's a great chance for our leadership team to kind of self-reflect. There are probably things that we've heard that we haven't fully implemented, but there are a lot of things that we've heard that have caused us to course correct. I mean, I'd liken it very similar to working with a board of directors, which every CEO does. Not everything your board says is spot on. Part of our role as leaders is to collect as much feedback as we can and then reflect on it and say, well, which of this is really valid? How do I prioritize this? And how do I want to course correct based on what I've learned? And I think that's what has been so valid. I mean, I literally going back to the health thing, if Nate told me that we should start calling him Dr. Nate Nielson, I'd be on board with that, because he actually is, I think, a real organizational doctor. And like my doctor, he tells me, hey, you should be working out a lot more. I listen to some of that advice. I probably don't work out quite as much as I still should.
I can't wait to see how quickly Nate puts organizational health doctor on his LinkedIn page.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I just did.
It's probably already up there. Yeah. I'm curious, Scott. So how big was your team when Nate first came in? Was it 13 people? And what's the size of it now? So that's the
Yeah.
first question.
Yeah.
And then the second question would be like, how were those conversations when you had to ask somebody to come off the team?
Oh, listen, I think we've probably gone from 13 to 8 is I think right. Listen, tough conversations are never easy.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean they
Yeah.
shouldn't be had. The most important conversations are the tough conversations. And, I think that's one of the things that also is a mantra of the table group. I mean, it's something you believe. One of the things that we're working really hard on in our organization consistently, and I think it will always be a priority, is just accountability. And accountability means, um, you know, not versioning the truth with one another, seeing the world as it really is, not having fear to have the hard conversations, and recognize that the only reason you ever have the hard conversations is because we're all working towards the same thing, which is we want to build a phenomenally successful company. And if you start with that, then the hard conversations become a lot easier. I mean, I think we've all been in situations where, we've worked with someone who you just kind of see uh, uh, isn't hitting on all cylinders. They're not successful in their job. And when you actually confront that truth, so often you have a really productive, cathartic conversation where the person says, yeah, it's not working. And so often, you can write a happy ending to that and help them find their next big thing. So I think that's kind of rule one of any organization is confront the hard truths and have the hard conversations, because out of that is when progress gets made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scott, talk to me a little bit about having those hard conversations behind closed doors versus having them in front of the team. And obviously there's a high level of discernment that's needed for which ones land where. But that's one thing we've talked through too, is like, all right, what does it mean to have all your accountability conversations behind closed doors versus having some of them done in front of the team?
Yeah, it's interesting. And Nate, I'm glad you raised this, because this is a conversation Nate and I have had quite a bit. And I've realized that for the first time in my career, like, I'm the old guy in the room. Like, I've always thought of myself as the young, hip, visionary,
Yeah.
And I realized, like, I've grown up in a different generation, because when I first became a manager, the mantra was praise in public, criticize in private.
Yeah. We hear
Right?
that all the
Because
time.
never criticize anybody publicly. And what I've realized is, increasingly, if that's the philosophy you follow, it actually it becomes cancerous. It starts to metastasize in the organization, because people see where the underperformance is. And if the CEO or leadership isn't calling that out, isn't shining a spotlight and saying, here's where things aren't working, and we got to get better on that, then people start to lose faith. And I mean, I could see it if you looked at my anonymous feedback from the organization over years. Like, it started to creep in, and people would say, is he paying attention? Why aren't people being held accountable? And that doesn't mean you have to have public hangings. It doesn't mean you berate people in public. It means that you just have a factual conversation of, hey, this is what went well, but this is what hasn't gone well.
Yeah.
And to take that a step farther, what I've realized is part of accountability isn't me saying it hasn't gone well, but whoever owns that specific area. Like, if we have a terrible quarter, for instance, and we're actually growing at an incredible rate. But hypothetically, if we had a bad quarter in sales, our sales leader would stand up and say, hey, we had a bad quarter, and here's what I'm doing about it.
Yeah.
Because it's not enough to just even acknowledge the problem, but you got to come with a plan of how you're going to solve it and how you're going to make it better. And when the people who own the problem, come with the solution, and share that with the organization, then I think it galvanizes everybody. They all lean in, and it increases the confidence and leadership. Nate, you tell the story. I've heard it a handful of times now of Alan Mullally at Ford. Of hey, who's got a problem? No one would say anything. No one would admit that things weren't going great, and their scorecard was green all the way. And as soon as someone has the courage to say, it's not hitting on all cylinders, here's an area where I need to improve, then all of a sudden you got a catalyst for change and acceleration in the organization.
Scott, I want to ask you a question. So you just laid out like good, better, best. So good is when a leader's willing to confront. I like how you said it. See the world as it really is. That's really good when a leader is able to confront, where we're not hitting it. Better is when the team is able to do that with each other. Best is when a person on the team raises their hand and says, hey, I'm not, I own this area and I'm struggling. I need some help. What have you done as a leader? What were some intentional choices that you made as a leader to promote that good, better, best way of approaching real issues?
Well, I mean, rule number one is about leadership is it starts with you. Yeah. Right. I mean, my dad, when I was a kid, one of his favorite sayings is, before you point the finger, look at the thumb. Right. And as you can see, the thumb looks right back at you. Right. And I think that's right. That when a senior leader, including the CEO, says, hey, I failed. And here's where I need to get better. I think that gives everybody else confidence to do the same. I also think, quite frankly, there's not a person around our leadership team at LiveRamp that it has not made a mistake in their career. And I think it's important that to acknowledge, if we want to be a great company, we got to move fast. We're going to make occasional mistakes. And when we do, we're going to fix them as opposed to heaping blame on one another. We're going to move forward and we're going to become better. And that kind of blameless culture where everyone's just leaning in and saying, there's a problem, we're going to fix it, tends to be a fuel that makes you go faster. If you get all the finger pointing, you never get past that. All you do is blame one another.
Yeah. So how did you foster that culture? I mean, is it just simply modeling it, or do you celebrate mistakes when they're made? Yeah. What are some different things? Because what you're hitting on right now is something that I think every CEO and every executive team struggles with.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One is the kind of modeling the safe space, and I was very upfront about where I wanted to improve with the team, and what I had realized is, and this will come back again when we talk about clarity of message and repetition, is my guess. What I had realized is I've been in my role for 14 years, and so I have a different team today than I did a decade ago. And so I shouldn't suppose that the team I have in place now knows everything that happened 10 years ago, went to the same sessions, had the same shared experiences, built the same level of trust, right? And so I've had to take a step back and say, okay, there's some people on the team that kind of know my style. We have a good rapport. There's some people on the team who are new and don't have that experience. And I have to be vulnerable. I have to slow down. I have to cast a spotlight on the things that aren't working and make sure that they feel comfortable weighing in with an opinion, acknowledging a mistake, even criticizing a colleague, and knowing that's safe. The second thing that we've really worked hard on, and again, this is probably I'll put this under the kind of good health habits category, is you got to shine a spotlight in the things that matter. And I think we had a lot of metrics that we were tracking. I think since working with the Table Group, it's probably the case that we regularly discuss fewer of those metrics, and we more frequently discuss those fewer metrics.
Mhm.
And so one of the really great suggestions that Nate had for us that we've implemented, and I think has been successful, is like most companies, we had a weekly leadership team meeting. And that was great, 90 minutes. We talk about everything. We go through our KPIs. That was super useful. But I'm in the technology world. Like my speed is so much faster than week intervals. Like, it's like the entire world can change between Monday and the weekend. And so one of the things we started doing is supplementing that weekly meeting with a regular 10-minute check-in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, where we all just, as a leadership team, get on the phone together and people say, hey, this is where I am today, or this is the problem I've been dealing with, or this is the thing I'm seeing. I'm worried about this client. We have this thing that is really close to the finish line, and we just need to agree on this contract term. How do we figure that out? And those touch bases have really helped a lot because it gives us a chance to just reconnect. And so it shines a spotlight on things that may be going wrong or things that are going right. And it also builds trust because it's more frequent rapport with one another. And it's giving us yet another chance to raise the issues that otherwise might go for a week.
Yeah.
And, again, when issues are allowed to linger, they metastasize. And if they're allowed to linger for a week, and it's over the course of the weekend, someone can get really bent out of shape, or a small issue can become a huge issue.
Yeah.
And so the frequency has really helped us a lot.
Yeah, that's great. And that is a pushback we get from a lot of executive teams. Like, we don't have time to meet that often. And it's like, how can you not meet that often? But keeping it, what Scott and LiveRamp team have done really was keeping it to that 10 minutes and making sure it doesn't become a 20 or a 30-minute, check-in, because that can be too much. Another thing that you mentioned, Scott, that I want to chat about a little bit, because I was able to go back. I think this was in March when you did your engineering kickoff. I might have my months wrong, but earlier this year you did kind of your engineering kickoff, and you had your simple strategy message up there. And we had, the very first time we got together, we had gone through kind of our strategy and execution questions and talking about what's most important right now. I remember the team had put up on our flip charts so many things. That was a moment in time. I remember I was like, I am the dumbest person in this room, because there's so much up here that feels so important and so strategic and so high level. And, your team had so much ambition to get it all done. But I remember somebody on the team said out loud, we're really good at pushing 25 things an inch, but we're not very good at pushing one thing a mile. And I remember that, and so we had talked about, what does that look like, and how do we simplify the message, and what's really important. And, your team had bought into that concept too. And now I feel like the focus is a simple message repeated over and over and over again. And so talk to us just a little bit about that and that switch and kind of the benefit you've seen from that.
Yeah. Are any of you guys musicians? James, you're a musician, right? All right. And Keith. So if we were putting together a band, it's so important that someone keeps the beat.
Yeah.
And that beat is often kept by the drummer, right? And if you think about songs you can remember, they have a steady, repeatable beat over and over and over again. And you know what's coming. And by the time the song's over, that jingle, that beat is just repeating in your head, right? And Nate, he's talked to us about the CEO as chief repeating officer. That you gotta be the drummer. You gotta play that beat such that everybody can follow along. You gotta bring along everyone for the ride. And so one of the things that we've started to do is we start every single town hall with the same slide. And it's the slide of what is our strategy. And it's one sentence. And I'm a creature of habit. So every time we have a town hall, I choose someone different. And while the strategy is on the screen behind me in big letters, a sentence, I say, hey, as a reminder to everybody, what is our strategy again? And I point to it. And so far, we're like 12 for 12 that people can
Wow.
read the sentence. But, as we read enough, it stops being funny and everyone just knows, like, hey, our strategy is to build the biggest data collaboration network in the world. And if you worked at LiveRamp or you were a customer of LiveRamp, you know exactly why that matters and why that scale unlocks a ton of value for you. And everything else can hang off of that. Again, this speaks to, I think, a challenge a lot of tech companies have and a lot of fast growing companies have. I realize, like, you tend to get a little defensive when you hear stuff like this. You're like, how is it someone doesn't understand our strategy? How is it that, like, all these confusing things, even from people that are pretty senior, like, they're articulating a few degrees differently. And what you realize is, in any given year, I mean, we're growing at 15% every year. And we're viewed as a talent magnet by a lot of headhunters. And so, we're probably adding 15% new folks to our organization every year or more. And in a couple of years, you're like, oh my gosh, 50% of our employees haven't been here for 10 years, haven't heard that repetition. And so even if you think everybody knows the song, everybody understands the beat, you got to continue it, because you're not necessarily catering to the person who's been here for 10 years and is tired of seeing the same slide. You're speaking to that young, talented engineer who might have the best idea in the world if they just understand what the strategy is and how they connect to it. And so you constantly have to sing the same song over and over and over again.
So glad that you're hitting on that. I think so many leaders get bored themselves with simple, clear messages, and they end up in sort of like strategy of the month or book of the quarter, and they, what you're talking about is just the simple rhythm, the cadence of, just keep it simple. I think that we often say that, many leaders find themselves in very, very complex situations because the work that we do is pretty complex. The work that you do is really complex, but we try to fight complexity with more complexity, and you're combating complexity with simplicity.
I'll tell you, Keith, one of the challenges that we had as a leadership team, and I think we've worked through it. But when you sit down at the start of the year and you say, well, what are our priorities going to be for the year? If you got 8 people in the room, all 8 of them feel like they need to get their top 3 things on the list. And then next thing you know, you got 50 priorities. And if 50 things are a priority, nothing is a priority.
Yeah.
And it's the clarity of, above all, what are we trying to accomplish? But then it's also just reinforcing, hey, a lot of people in the organization do really important stuff. And we can help you connect what you're doing to that overarching strategy, but not everyone is going to hold the pen to write the strategy, because otherwise the strategy just turns into a jumbo word salad.
Yeah.
And so, it's getting clear on less things, but do those things really well.
Yeah.
You brought up Alan Mulally earlier. He used to carry a card around with just his simple principles for how he was going to lead forward. And people would ask him if anything has changed. He's like, nope, same things, just these simple one Ford principles. And that's how he was able to turn that place around. And then you talked about Microsoft. Boy, I would think over the last few years, their number one priority was AI. And having that, like, obviously they had other ones, but that was really key, and probably that's probably so attributable to their success in the last few years.
Yeah. As an aside, to set up for this webinar, I used Copilot to explain how to set up the technology that we're using right now. So
That's funny.
certainly they've made a product that has made my life easier, and I appreciate that.
Scott, I read an article recently that somebody sent us, and it talked about, it was a reductionistic job descriptions, which I've been using ever since. Like, kind of, what's the mandate of your role? And in the article, they said the reductionistic job description of the CEO is to know what matters most, and to focus on that, and not ignore, and then not focus on everything else. And
Yeah. I mean, I think that's right. I would tell you, there's probably another piece that goes right along with it. Because if I think about what is my role and what is the role of every CEO, it's, land the strategy. So that's what matters most. But then build an amazing team. And I'd like to think that if I got hit by a car, our board would have a difficult decision around my successor, because we have a lot of talented people. And so my job is to hire people that are spectacularly more talented in their area than I am, and then help them work together to achieve something even bigger than any of them could achieve on their own.
Wow.
I've been a CEO for 14, 15 years. I'm still a work in progress. It's one of those things that every year makes you humbler, because you realize the world around us is changing. Cultures are changing, expectations are changing, technology is changing. I got to change too, to stay ahead. And so I try to do that. But the one common denominator across it all is amazing companies are always built by amazing teams. I'll tell you a story of my own. Years ago, when I was in business school, I went to see Warren Buffett speak. And Warren Buffett showed up, and I was at Harvard Business School. The auditorium was packed. 2 years of business school students listening to Warren Buffett, who at the time, this was 30 years ago, was a crusty old guy who was viewed as, the genius of business. Today, he's an even crustier old guy who's still viewed as the genius of business. And someone raised their hand at the end of his presentation and called on him, and they said, "Hey, Warren, what's the next company you're going to buy?" And he laughed, and he didn't give an answer. But he said, "Let me tell you about the kind of companies I buy." And, he said, "If you were down to your last dollar, I want you to look around the auditorium, and who would you invest it with?" Because that's the secret of business. When I look at companies, I always look, you talked about it needs to be a business model, I understand, but it needs to be a team in which I believe. Because if you have a talented enough team, no matter what problem is thrown at them, they will be able to together figure it out and move quickly and solve it faster than the folks down the street. And, I've always thought about that in the ensuing 30 years. Like, if I just surround myself with talented people, good things tend to happen. And so, I think it's the goal of every CEO is hire incredibly talented people and turn them loose. My career has, any success I've had has largely been because I have been blessed to work with talented people.
Yeah. And I want to add to that really quick and just say, Scott, you're a great leader too. And to have a great leader on a great team, and a leader that's willing to invest in not just the smart side of the team, but the health of the team. It's been fun to watch that team grow and watch you grow as a leader. And, it's been an honor to be working with you.
It almost seems
that, Nate. Yeah. I'll tell you, I'm looking forward to the next investment we're going to make. And if you're okay, Nate, I'll share what I've challenging our leadership team to do, and Nate's going to be involved with that, which is, we look at AI as a real inflection point.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an extinction event. It changes everything. There's not a functional area that AI doesn't touch. And HR and talent acquisition, it's about, how can you identify great candidates? How can you use it for mentorship and coaching? I used AI this year in writing my performance reviews, and it helped me synthesize feedback and get to more actionable recommendations. In client service, automated queries, in engineering, writing code faster. In sales, it's about preparing for a meeting or creating collateral very quickly. I saw a company the other day that was talking about in their creative production, they do videos, their advertising videos on television. They had reduced it through the use of AI from 10 weeks down to 36 minutes. You couldn't tell the difference between the avatar and the real person. Could not tell the difference. And so it has an implication for everybody in the organization, but like, people shouldn't be scared of it. They should embrace it and say, how does this change how I can succeed at my job, how I do my job? And I think we're at this inflection point, very similar to the introduction of like PCs 35 years ago, where companies that embrace this and they don't run from it, but rather they embrace it and they figure out how to use it effectively, how to make everything they do better and achieve more because of their embrace of AI. They're going to succeed. And those that hide and pretend like the world hasn't changed, they're in danger of falling behind. And so, this will be a fun one because, it's everybody in the organization's responsibility. And so one of the things we're going to plan on doing is just, roll out some tools, give people a sandbox to play in, and then challenge them to reimagine their jobs, their functions, and dream about what does the org look like in 3 years if we do this, and how does that differ from today? And it's a really neat new challenge. I'm excited about it. It doesn't. The world is bifurcated. I read people who say, "Oh, it's the biggest threat." I don't feel that way. I think this is, one of the greatest catalysts, the opportunities that business, that society, that we as people have had to develop our own skills and, make a bigger impact.
Yeah.
And so, who knows? We'll see where this goes, Nate. But I think it's going to be really fun. And none of it would be possible if it weren't for the trust and the transparency that we've created, because that is the foundation that now allows us to go explore new things without the fear that might have been there a few years ago.
Yeah. That's amazing. Hey, Scott, this has been fantastic. I feel like we should do like a part 2 episode at some point, because I've taken more notes of things that you've said as you've been talking, just, confronting the hard truth and, shining a spotlight on the things that matter. And I love that idea of more frequently checking in on fewer things. So it is clear that you've embraced the idea of bringing talented people into the organization, but then you've kind of mastered the art of what it looks like to help those talented people build trust and be transparent, hold each other accountable. Like, that's where you've seen this unlock.
Yeah.
So, Nate, any final thought from you? And then we're going to just wrap this thing up.
No, I just
hear Dr. Nate.
Yeah. Dr. Nate, Dr. Nate.
No, I just agree. And Scott, thanks for your time. I was looking at kind of the timer on the recording and was like, man, we need more time with Scott. But
totally.
I appreciate you coming on and joining us, Scott, and sharing some of your wisdom, and looking forward to getting back in the room with you and your team next month.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. This was really fun.
All right.
Thank
you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us on the Organizational Health Advantage. And we just encourage you to go ahead and just like this episode, share it with your friends. I know we'll be sharing it with other CEOs that we work with, and we will see you next time. That's all for now.
Thanks for listening to the Org Health Advantage. Your hosts, Keith and James, are helping leaders change the world of work and invite you to share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. For more resources on building stronger teams and organizational health, check out tablegroup.com.